In the world of organized crime, cartels, and drug trafficking, men account for the majority of the general populace. But in recent years, things have changed, and women have begun to take on dangerous roles in the criminal underworld. The women who are brave enough to join cartels have proved to be as deadly, or even more so, than their male counterparts. So, they participate in all aspects of the drug trafficking trade, ranging from money laundering to brutal assassinations. While some of these women seem to be successful in their operations, not all of them are lucky enough to make it out alive. One of the many women who lost their lives in the service of the underworld is the Gulf Cartel's La Flaca. In today's video, I'll be retelling the story of the cartel hitwoman who was butchered by her enemies. The shocking discovery. Monday, the 13th of April, 2015, started out as a normal day for the residents of Matamoros, Tamaulipas. The town's residents went about their day completely unaware of what was to come. Absolutely no one could have foreseen the shocking discovery that would spread town-wide gloom and serve as a reminder of the brutality that had taken place. Mexican law enforcement officials in the area were executing their daily duties when they came across 3 beer coolers with no one watching them. The coolers were abandoned at the Soriana parking lot, a place where anyone would expect to find a cooler of beer. But when the authorities went to take a closer look, they discovered that instead of beer, the coolers contained human remains. Upon further examination, the police learned that the parts they had found belonged to 3 unfortunate victims, 2 women and 1 man. The remains were left in a terrible state. Whoever killed the 3 had taken the time to dismember their bodies in a way that made it particularly difficult to identify them. A parking lot is one of the places one would least expect to find dismembered dead bodies for several reasons. One of the more obvious ones is the sheer number of people driving in and out who would serve as potential witnesses. No one in their right mind would take the risk of getting caught in public with mutilated bodies, unless they had a message to pass on. And in this case, the perpetrators did have a message. They wanted to make an example out of these 3 victims. As if the contents of the coolers weren't bad enough, parts of the badly mutilated bodies were packed into plastic bags and dumped in very unexpected places around the town. Faced with the reality that such brutality had taken place, and appalled by the brazenness of their perpetrators, the authorities immediately jumped into action. They began to do everything in their power to identify the bodies, as well as find out the people who were responsible. As the investigation progressed, it didn't take long for investigators to find a message signed by Los Metros, a brutal cartel that would go to any lengths to eliminate anyone they considered to be an enemy or a threat. Thorough examinations carried out on the remains that were found revealed that the 3 victims had been mercilessly tortured, possibly to extract vital information from them. Investigators believed that although the victims suffered a great deal of physical pain before meeting their ends, they were eventually put out of their misery when they each took a gunshot to the head. After they were murdered in cold blood, the 3 bodies were cut into smaller pieces and preserved with ice before being disposed of. Seeing how the bodies were left in an almost unidentifiable state, the investigators had to work with whatever they could find. One of their biggest clues was that one of the 2 women found had a distinctive tattoo of the word Niño on her forearm. Using the tattoo, they were able to identify her. A few months before, the picture of a young girl, Jocelyn Alejandra Niño, allegedly circulated on social media. In the pictures, she had the same Niño tattoo investigators saw on the dismembered arm. Jocelyn was believed to be in her late teens or early 20s at the time of the brutal murders. So the question is, how did such a young girl get involved with cartels, and what had she done to deserve such a terrible death? Jocelyn Alejandra Niño. Jocelyn Alejandra Niño, aka La Flaca, was born in Tamaulipas, northeastern Mexico, and from every indication, she was born into a relatively poor background. Not much is known about Jocelyn's relationship with her family, or even her education background. It is also not certain how she got sucked into the world of drug cartels, but the most common reasons young girls of her social standing get mixed up with the criminal underworld are extreme poverty, a desire for power, or family ties. In some cases, young girls are lured into the cartel by their love interests, who are already members, but no one knows for sure if this is what happened in Jocelyn's case. What the world knows is that Jocelyn joined the Gulf Cartel as a teenager and gradually worked her way up. Typically, young girls like Jocelyn, who get mixed up with the drug cartels and other criminal organizations, are made to work as sex workers. In some cases, they are ushered into the cartel's lowest rank, known as halcones, which translates to falcons in English. As the lowest ranking members in any drug cartel, these girls are tasked with being the cartel's eyes and ears on the street. Their duties range from watching out for police movements to keeping tabs on the operations of rival cartel groups. After gathering valuable information, they report their findings to higher-ranking cartel members. As time passes, girls like Jocelyn, from poor backgrounds, see the glamorous lifestyles led by the men in higher ranks, and they become enthralled by it. The ambitious falcons give their all to learn about the cartels and how they operate. Armed with this new information, the girls slowly begin to climb their way up the ladder until they are bumped up to the position of sicarios, otherwise known as hitmen, foot soldiers. Within the cartel, sicarios are responsible for carrying out kidnappings, thefts, extortions, assassinations, and protection racketeering. Typically, the position of sicario is reserved for men, so the few women who make it in strive to become as ruthless as their male counterparts. Soon, their hard work starts to pay off, and the girls get recognized by the higher-ranking lieutenants in the cartel. Hence, they are given more responsibility. They become more ruthless as they find their footing within the rank. working hard to prove their relevance to the cartel bosses. Perhaps the most important use of female assassins is in their ability to look beautiful, young, and harmless while carrying out their deadly missions. For example, if the cartel's target was the leader or a high-ranking member of a rival cartel who would be heavily guarded, the girls are asked to step up to the task by taking advantage of their femininity. They use their charms to warm their way in until they get close enough to take down their target and flee before anyone even suspects them. Jocelyn served the Gulf cartel well. She was a skilled hitwoman who was willing to take down anyone as long as she was ordered to. She earned her nickname La Flaca, which translates to the skinny one, as a result of her appearance. But there was another reason for the moniker. The nickname also represents the Mexican spirit of death, Santa Muerte, that also shares the name La Flaca. The spirit is popular and well depicted in artworks of the Day of the Dead festival. Jocelyn was skinny, young, and had a childlike body, so after being promoted to the position of Sicaria, she used her appearance to her advantage. She could easily fool her targets and get them to let their guards down around her before she mercilessly carried out her mission. She mastered the art of being a silent murderer and being able to keep a low profile, or at least she did until it was too late. The beginning of the end. Due to the nature of their missions and activities, cartel members know that their survival is highly dependent on keeping their identities hidden. While some cartel members love to show off their weapons on social media, the vast majority keep away from online platforms in a bid to remain hidden from law enforcement, as well as rival cartels. Jocelyn was one of the many who decided to keep a low profile on the internet. Unfortunately, even that choice could not guarantee her safety. What would be the eventual end of Jocelyn Niño as an assassin began in January 2015, when an anonymous person uploaded a picture of her on a journalist site called Valor por Tamaulipas. Prior to the photo leak, the page had gained massive popularity for making posts about organized crime syndicates and putting out updates on the security in Mexico. In the picture that was uploaded, Jocelyn had a huge smile as she posed for the camera carrying a modified M4 assault rifle in her hands. She had a bulletproof vest on her, which insinuated that she was either heading out to carry out an assignment or that she'd just returned from one. Whichever the case, Jocelyn had a smile on her face, one that made it seem as though she was happy. She also had sunglasses on her head and a golden necklace on. Immediately after its release, the picture spread like wildfire and was soon reposted to Twitter and Facebook. While any regular person would be excited at the prospect of getting so much attention, every cartel-affiliated person knew that much attention would do Jocelyn more harm than good. Within a few days, thousands of people had seen the picture, and nearly everyone had something to say. Several people commented on the background of the picture. The apartment where the picture was taken showcases the low-income lifestyle of cartel assassins, which is nothing like the luxurious apartments owned by those at the top. Considering the fact that she didn't seem to be very wealthy, despite putting her life on the line for the cartel's benefit, many people on the internet began to wonder if the life of crime Jocelyn was living was worth it. The picture also paved the way for conversations about how drug lords use money and luxury as bait to attract young people who are looking for a way out of poverty, only for them to join the cartels and realize that the money isn't as easily handed out as they were made to believe. Unfortunately, by the time the new recruits figure this out, it's too late to turn back. So these youngsters give their lives to the cartels until they either end up in jail or killed. Now that they had visual evidence to work with, it didn't take long for investigators to identify Jocelyn as a member of the Gulf cartel under the Los Ciclones faction. At the time of the leak, the Los Ciclones faction had been at war with another Gulf cartel faction known as Los Metros. The war between the two factions reportedly began in January 2015, and while most of the cartel wars are known to consist of nothing but mindless violence, the factions took their war to another level. They began leaking pictures of their rivals on social media. Each faction leaked whatever pictures they could, with hopes that the authorities would arrest those who had been displayed and in turn help weaken the rival faction. Since they knew about the ongoing war, when the authorities discovered that Jocelyn was part of the Los Ciclones faction, they immediately knew who did it. The picture had been leaked by the members of Los Metros. The end of Jocelyn Alejandro Niño. As a Los Ciclones member, Jocelyn's duties included preventing members of Los Metros from coming into areas that Los Ciclones had claimed as their territory, and finding ways to infiltrate places like Rio Bravo, which Los Metros had claimed for themselves. The Los Metros faction was in charge of Rio Bravo, and had made it difficult for Los Ciclones members to carry out their business there. In addition to preventing them from doing business in the area, the members of Los Metros would immediately kill any member of the Los Ciclones faction that was found there. Knowing full well the danger that was lurking in Rio Bravo, Angel Eduardo Prado Rodriguez, the leader of the Los Ciclones faction, positioned Jocelyn and her team there to prevent incursions. As Jocelyn continued to carry out operations, despite her high-risk location, her picture continued to get massive attention on social media. What she didn't know was that her end was closer than she could imagine. Sometime between the 13th and 14th of April, Jocelyn landed in the hands of members of the rival faction and was taken captive. She was kidnapped by suspected members of Los Metros, alongside two other unidentified members of Los Ciclones. Within 24 to 48 hours of the kidnapped, Jocelyn faced the worst the world had to offer before she was finally killed and mutilated. After the bodies of Jocelyn and her comrades were found on the 15th, Los Metros took to social media to celebrate what they considered to be a victory. The faction posted different pictures of Jocelyn that were taken in hours before her death. In one of the pictures, Jocelyn is seen lying limp on the ground, and beside her were the two other Los Ciclones members who were kidnapped with her. The trio seemed to have been beaten to a pulp and looked almost lifeless in the picture. The second batch of photos that Los Metros released was taken after the three had been killed and their remains had been dismembered and stuffed into coolers. Despite their gory nature, the pictures were released to the internet for all to see, but they were specifically intended to serve as a message and warning to the members of Los Ciclones. In the coolers, investigators found a message from Los Metros alongside the bodies. The message read, "This will happen to all the filthy who support Los Ciclones. Keep sending these f***ing assholes." The message further criticized Los Ciclones for enlisting female foot soldiers for their dirty business. Los Metros also promised that there would be more killings in the war. A well-known member of the faction who operated under the moniker 65 signed the message. The fact that La Flaca was killed in such a brutal manner by members of a faction that existed within the same Gulf cartel that she belonged to goes to show the fragility of these cartels and how infighting among factions can be just as deadly as battles with rival cartels. Both situations often lead to the same results. Cartel members either end up behind bars or they wind up dead. The fear of winding up dead or being put behind bars should be enough reason to make anyone stay away from such organizations. Unfortunately, the more cartel members are killed or jailed, the more young people join these cartels in their numbers. Learning of the tragic incident that eventually led to Jocelyn's unfortunate demise, it's hard not to wonder what brought about the infighting within the Gulf Cartel in the first place. The Gulf Cartel rise to prominence. The Gulf Cartel, or Cartel de Golfo, CDG, is regarded as one of the oldest organized crime groups in all of Mexico. The Gulf Cartel was founded in the 1930s by Juan Nepomuceno Guerra under the name Cartel de Matamoros, or the Matamoros Cartel, and it started out as an alcohol smuggling unit. Under the leadership of Juan Guerra, the cartel smuggled tons of alcohol and heroin into the United States during the Prohibition era. As soon as the Prohibition era ended, the Gulf Cartel diversified its businesses. They ventured into all sorts of criminal activities, ranging from car theft to sex work and gambling. Despite this decision to diversify as a means to make more money, the cartel didn't witness significant growth until 1984, when Guerra's nephew, Juan Garcia Abrego, took control of the drug trafficking organization. Abrego, who climbed up the ranks of the cartel under the tutelage of his uncle, saw an opportunity to take the business to the next level and took it without a second thought. It was this one decision that marked the beginning of the Gulf Cartel's power and influence, cementing them as one of Mexico's greatest crime groups. In the 1980s, U.S. law enforcement cracked down on Caribbean drug trafficking routes used by the Cali Cartel, a Colombian cartel that made millions from trafficking drugs into the U.S. The search for new trafficking routes led the Cali Cartel's leaders, the Rodriguez Orejuela brothers, to Garcia Abrego. After smoothing out the details, the two parties struck a deal, one that would help the Cali Cartel smuggle their drugs through the Mexican border. Garcia Abrego made an irresistible offer to the Cali Cartel's leadership. He promised them that he would bear all the risk involved in smuggling the drugs through the Mexican border, and in return, they had to pay the Gulf Cartel 50% of their profits. Business with Cali Cartel turned out to be great for Garcia Abrego, and it was estimated that by 1994, the Gulf Cartel was in charge of shipping 1/3 of all cocaine that got into the United States. The Gulf Cartel expanded greatly, and Garcia Abrego continued to acquire different warehouses along the Mexican border, where he packed the cocaine before they were smuggled into the US. As lucrative as it was proving to be, cocaine wasn't all that the cartel was known for. They also got their hands into massive money laundering schemes. Abrego expanded the business so much so that the Mexican authorities estimated that the Gulf Cartel was worth over $10 billion in the 1990s. Garcia Abrego remained in charge of drug trafficking in Mexico until January of 96, when he was apprehended just outside the city of Monterrey. Before his arrest, the authorities had no clue about the extent of the cartel's business until one of Abrego's traffickers, Juan Antonio Ortiz, was arrested. Ortiz decided to cooperate with the authorities in a bid to get a lighter sentence, and so he disclosed everything he knew about the Gulf Cartel's operations. Ortiz told the authorities that Garcia Abrego used immigration buses to transport cocaine into the United States. The buses were never stopped at the border, so he would bribe whoever needed to be bribed and then use the buses for his business. To ensure that his operations ran smoothly, Garcia Abrego made friends with people in high places, and he made a habit of handing out bribes. According to some reports, Abrego once went as far as paying $100,000 to an FBI agent as a bribe so he could get sensitive information that he believed could be used to his advantage. In 1995, Garcia Abrego was put on the list of the FBI's top 10 most wanted criminals. This was yet another indication that Garcia's empire had grown grown so much. At the time, he was the first drug trafficker to make the FBI's most wanted list. The downside to securing a spot on the FBI's most wanted list is that the target on Garcia's back became larger than he ever thought it could be. Around a year later, on the 14th of January 96, Garcia Abrego was arrested outside a ranch in Monterrey, Nuevo León. The jig was up. Immediately after his arrest, Garcia Abrego was extradited to the US, where he was tried and convicted for 22 counts of money laundering, drug possession, and drug trafficking. During his trial, there were allegations that the Mexican government knew all about his movements in business, but they chose to turn a blind eye because he had evidence that could prove the extent of corruption in the Mexican government. Garcia Abrego was sentenced to 11 consecutive life sentences, which he is serving to date. Abrego's arrest meant that the cartel's leadership position was empty, and as you would expect, many members had their eyes on the throne. Garcia Abrego's brother, Humberto Abrego, made all efforts to take over the leadership of the cartel following his brother's arrest, but he was faced with opposition from the Cali cartel because they did not believe in his leadership abilities. From this point on, the Gulf Cartel was headed by a string of leaders whose tenures were short-lived because they were either arrested or killed by rival cartels. The Gulf Cartel's next notable leader was Ociel Cardenas, who took full control of the cartel in 1999. At the time, the cartel was facing fire from rival cartels, so Cardenas came up with a unique plan to combat the cartel's enemies and guard against people who were planning to take the leadership position from him. He recruited 30 men who had previously served in the Mexican Army Special Forces, but had left for one reason or another. Cardenas formed a group that would become known as Los Zetas to serve as protection from rival cartels and the Mexican authorities, so that he could continue to perform his duties as the leader of Mexico's most influential cartel. After it was formed, Los Zetas quickly became known as a brutal and heartless group who used their military training to overpower rival cartels, serve as enforcers, and carry out kidnappings. Los Zetas continued to function under Cardenas' leadership until his arrest in 2003. By this time, they had slowly started to gain influence in the cartel. With Cardenas out of the picture, Los Zetas remained a part of the Gulf Cartel, but in 2010, the group broke off to form a cartel of their own. Before his arrest, Cardenas created other, smaller groups aside from Los Zetas. Among the groups he created were the Rojos, which translates to the Red Ones, the Metros, and the Lobos, which translates to the Wolves. Each group had their leaders, but they all answered to Cardenas. 2010 turned out to be the year of chaos for the Gulf Cartel, because not only did the Los Zetas break out to ride solo, the other groups formed by Cardenas got into territorial fights, and that was the beginning of infighting among different factions of the Gulf Cartel. While the Gulf Cartel is still in existence to date, there have been a lot of infights between factions and breakouts from the cartel. Current known factions of the Gulf Cartel include the Scorpions, Cyclones, Reds, Metros, and Panthers. These groups continue to engage in fights over territories and smuggling routes, completely undeterred by the number of casualties. It is these territorial fights that led to the untimely death of Jocelyn Nino, the Gulf Cartel's youngest assassin. Jocelyn may have been killed by a rival gang, but there are people who believe her life came to an end because of her chosen nickname, La Flaca, and the curse that comes with the name. The Curse of La Flaca. In a surprising turn of events, Jocelyn isn't the first or second hit woman to take up the nickname. What's worse is that her predecessors have all met with bad luck, but they would be grateful not to be in Jocelyn's shoes. As I earlier mentioned, Jocelyn Nino isn't the first female assassin to go by the name La Flaca. Before she took up the moniker, there had been 2 other female assassins before her, and they all worked for different cartels. It is important to note that all these women were ultimately met with extreme bad luck, which has led people to believe that the name La Flaca might have a hand in the evil that befell them. The first woman to have gone by the nickname, according to public records, was Veronica Mireya Moreno Carreon, a once decorated police officer who eventually turned to a life of crime. In 2009, Veronica was wounded during a shootout between police officers and would-be kidnappers. The kidnappers were trying to abduct a car salesman. Following the incident, Veronica was awarded for distinguished service and also received scholarships for advanced training. After her service in the force, Veronica chose a different path for herself by joining the Los Zetas cartel. No one knows when she joined the cartel, but like many other cartel members, the former police officer started from the bottom and worked her way to the top. As time passed, Veronica showed that she was more than willing to do the dirty work. She specialized in torture, collection of kidnap ransoms, extortion, and movement of drugs between factions. In due time, Veronica's commitment caught the attention of her superiors within the cartel, and she was given what you would call a promotion. Impressed by her dedication and ruthless nature, the heads of Los Zetas chose to make Veronica the leader of the Los Zetas cell, the Plaza de San Nicolas de los Garza, Nuevo León, a position that was previously held by Raúl García Rodriguez. By taking on this new position, Veronica became the first woman to hold a leadership position in the Los Zetas cartel. Also, the fact that she was picked to replace a man had a huge impact on the gender role dynamics in the organized crime world. Seemingly unbothered by the attention she gained for her new position, Veronica continued to serve as an assassin and a leader for the Los Zetas cartel for as long as she could, but sooner or later, fate would catch up with her. She was eventually apprehended by the Marines in 2011 in Santa Fe Oriente. The report of a car theft led to her arrest, as she was caught driving the car. At the time of the arrest, officers found a .38 special revolver, 100 packets of cocaine, 50 doses of crack, 2 packages of marijuana, and 6 portable phones on her. Veronica was charged with being an accomplice to numerous murders and drug deals. Thanks to the pile of evidence against her, Veronica was found guilty and was sent to prison, effectively marking the end of the very first La Flaca. The second recorded La Flaca is Nancy Manriquez Quintanar, who was arrested in October 2011. The 25-year-old was arrested in the municipality of Ecatepec and is believed to have been involved in at least 9 murders committed by the Los Zetas cartel. Nancy confessed to the authorities that her duty as a female assassin was to visit bars and nightclubs where she would befriend and extract information from unsuspecting enemies of Los Zetas, after which she would arrange for them to be killed. The ones that came after. While Veronica Moreno and Nancy Quintanar were serving their time in jail, Jocelyn Nino took up the La Flaca title, and perhaps the perceived curse that comes with it. Unfortunately for Jocelyn, she received the worst hit, and her life ended rather abruptly. The tales of the female assassins should serve as a warning to young girls out there, but unfortunately, the stories also serve as proof that women are capable of taking on important roles in the drug trafficking world beyond sex work and child rearing. So instead of living crime-free lives and staying on the right side of the law, many young girls still choose to join cartels with hopes of becoming leaders and gaining influence like Jocelyn Nino and the woman that came before her. Today, the concept of employing the services of female assassins has spread like wildfire across the numerous cartels in Mexico. Having realized that thanks to certain factors, female assassins may be capable of accomplishing certain feats that their male counterparts simply can't. The top cartels in Mexico have established groups of 3 or more female assassins who are known as flacas. Instead of carrying out the traditional roles assigned to women within cartels, which range from money laundering to child raising, young women who have come in contact with drug cartels in recent times are choosing to join the death squads, where they are trained to subtly infiltrate rival cartels. In order to get the kind of male attention required for the job, some of the flacas undergo cosmetic surgeries to enhance their bodies. They then use their bodies to attract their targets and gain their trust. One flaca, known as La Peque, who was recently captured by the authorities, spoke up on the kinds of heinous acts she was involved in while working for the Sinaloa cartel. She stated that she had killed at least 5 men in her time as an assassin, and while that is in itself horrifying, things only get worse from then on. After revealing the shocking number of her victims, La Peque confessed that she enjoyed being intimate with her already decapitated victims, after which she would consume their warm blood. La Peque's confession only goes to prove the extent that these young girls are willing to go to in order to prove their worth as flacas. Because of the misfortune that befell the 3 women who took up the moniker La Flaca, many people believe the curse of La Flaca exists. But there is one woman who was able to work as a female assassin and escape both death and capture. In her prime, La Malandra, or Comandante Malandra, worked as a brutal assassin for the Los Zetas cartel for many years. According to several reports, she was recruited into the gang when she was only 9 years old. Despite being one of the top assassins in the organization, La Malandra was able to manage her criminal career and remain hidden from authorities. After 9 years of service to the cartel, La Malandra is still a free citizen of Mexico who has neither been killed nor arrested. Unfortunately, not many women who venture into the criminal underworld are lucky enough to end up like La Malandra.